Good morning. This is a recording for Tuesday, April 16th. When it comes to shame, understanding is a prerequisite for change. We cannot consciously make the decision to change our behavior until we are aware of what we're thinking and why we're thinking it. And we need to be really mindful as we unearth our shame triggers. Brené Brown says there are three main issues that are always present at the workshops where shame triggers assessments are being performed. First, when we identify these desired and unwanted identities, we are very hard on ourselves. We give ourselves very little room to be human. Second, we cannot deny the power of the messages we heard growing up. And last, most of us judge others whom we perceive as having the traits we dislike in ourselves. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes we believe that acknowledging our triggers will make them worse. We convince ourselves that if we pretend they don't exist, it's somehow easier. Well, it's not. Our feelings, beliefs, and actions are motivated by these triggers regardless of whether we write them down and acknowledge them or we stay in our denial. Recognizing and understanding our shame triggers is the only path to change. When we refuse to recognize shame and understand the messages and expectations that trigger our shame, we often rely on what Brené Brown calls shame screens to protect us. As we'll learn today though, not only is relying on shame screens is ineffective, it can often be shame-inducing in itself. Brené Brown came up with the term shame screen after analyzing data from the first 100 interviews. As participants explained the unpredictable and sometimes unconscious ways they reacted in response to shame, she realized the experiences actually shared something in common, which is when we are in shame, we are often overcome with the need to hide or protect ourselves by any means possible. I'll repeat that because I think it's important. When we are in shame, we are often overcome with the need to hide or protect ourselves by any means possible. This is what Brené Brown writes. As I thought about our protective reactions to shame, I kept envisioning smoke screens, the canisters of dense smoke used by the military to hide their activities from the enemy. Unfortunately, though, shame screens don't work. We are not dealing with tanks and infantry behind enemy lines here. We are dealing with people and relationships. Wouldn't it be great if we could just carry those canisters on our belts and when someone hurt our feelings, shamed us, or made us angry, we could just whip out the canister of thick smoke, launch it, and run? Or we could even just stand there behind the wall of smoke and make rude gestures. Please. I'd order them by the case if I thought they would work. But we cannot do that. The reality is, when we throw up the shame screen, we're usually the ones who end up choking on the smoke. The reality is, when we throw up the shame screen, we are usually the ones who end up choking on the smoke. When we experience shame, our first layer of defense often occurs involuntarily. It goes back to our primal fight, flight, or freeze response. Dr. Shelley Uram, a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, explains that most of us think of traumatic events as big events, like car wrecks and disasters. But she points out we tend not to recognize the small, quiet traumas that often trigger the same brain survival reaction. And actually, one of our fellow Mindful Mornings practitioners, Sandra Daw, was speaking exactly to that in one of her comments a few days ago when she said, we have all experienced shame. However, at the time of these micro-shaming events, we don't necessarily understand the cumulative effect on self-esteem in the long run. Interesting to reflect on this. Spot on, Sandra. And yes, guys, I do read all your comments, and I actually try to respond to all of them. Anyway, going back to Brené Brown, she says, after studying Dr. Uram's work, I believe it's possible that many of our early shame experiences, especially with parents and caregivers, was stored in our brain as traumas. This is why we often have such painful bodily reactions when we feel criticized, ridiculed, rejected, and shamed. The brain just doesn't differentiate between overt and big trauma and covert and small, quiet trauma. It just registers the event as a threat we cannot control. That's it. In her work on remembering the wound versus becoming the wound, Dr. Uram explains that most of the time when we recall a memory, we are conscious that we are in the present, recalling something from the past. However, when we experience something in the present that triggers an old trauma memory, we are re-experiencing the sense of the original trauma. So rather than remembering the wound, we actually become the wound. This makes a lot of sense when we think of how we are often return to a place of smallness and helplessness when we feel shame, just like we felt when we were children and being shamed. The next layer of shame screens after the fight, flight, freeze response is something that Dr. Linda Hartling calls strategies of disconnection. According to her, in order to deal with shame, some of us move away by withdrawing, hiding, silencing ourselves, and keeping secrets. Some of us move toward by seeking to appease and please. And some of us move against by trying to gain power over others, being aggressive and using shame to fight shame. And probably at some point or another, we have all used all of those strategies of disconnection. And interestingly, we usually reserve the moving against strategy for people with whom we feel the deepest connection, our family, our close friends. And it makes sense because this is often where it feels safest to dump our anger and fear. We develop shame screens over years. Sometimes the way we handle shame has become so deeply ingrained in us that we cannot even see it. Other times, we'll read a book or listen to other people's stories and recognize our own patterns. Either way, it takes much more than just reading a book to change how we feel, act, and how we believe. We actually need to put these ideas into practice because we change in and through our relationships with others. Sometimes we can do that with friends and families. Other times we need the support of a professional, a therapist, or a coach who can walk us through the process. Whatever it is, it's a unique and very individual journey. How we get there depends on who we are. But the hope is that we do get there. Another thing to keep in mind is that resilience, shame resilience, of course, is not a one-time cure. Brené Brown says, "Don't think I've spent all this time and energy dissecting my experiences and the payoff is no more shame screens for me." No, I still use ineffective shame screens. It happens all the time. I'm just more likely to move through it quicker and with fewer casualties. And that's very real. The exercise we will do in our practice today is designed to identify our shame screens and our response, basically our response to shaming. Brené Brown suggests doing this kind of reality checks for each of the 12 shame categories we have been working with for the past couple of days. In today's practice, we will go through just one category to give you an idea of what it takes, and then you can do the rest on your own, of course, if you'd like to do it. As always, I've already posted this task in our private group Mindful Morning Circle, so you can find more information there. And if you're getting confused and lost with all these exercises and tasks that are being offered here, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll be happy to walk you through the process and answer any questions I can. Without further ado, let's take a comfortable position and take a few moments to settle. Settle into your body, into your heart, your mind. Settle into this moment, right here, right now. Your breath nice and soft, completely natural. See if you can find softness, spaciousness, freedom in your breathing, so that all the experiences of the present moment, physical sensations, thoughts, emotions, can flow through you as energy that they are, without struggle. Now, think of a specific shame experience related to one of the 12 general shame categories. Today, let's work with the category appearance and body image. Just as an example, I hope you will do all the 12 on your own. So pick a specific situation in which you felt shame related to your appearance and body image. Our goal here is to identify the smoke screen you typically use for such experiences. So, without dwelling on the storyline for too long, just think of how exactly did you respond to this feeling of shame? What was your shame smokescreen? And remember, there are some layers to our shame screens. The first layer is our primal response: fight, flight, or freeze. So, what was yours in that particular situation? Did you want to fight back with anger and maybe shame the person right back, or, I don't know, punch them out? Or did you wish to magically disappear from the scene so that nobody would notice you? Now think whatever your response was, and of course, there is nothing, right or wrong here. It's just whatever it was your response, and it's perfect. But is that your usual pattern in such situations? And again, be open and honest with yourself. Remember, you cannot change what you're not aware of. So, was it a kind of a pattern for you? It's okay if it was, it's okay if it wasn't. It's all good. Now, let's go into the second layer of the shame screens. What was your disconnection strategy in that situation? And I'll remind you, there were 3 disconnection strategies: moving away, moving toward, or moving against. So, was it moving away from the situation? Keeping quiet, maybe trying to hide, maybe trying to just leave the room or the situation, whatever it is. Was it moving toward the situation? Trying to justify, explain yourself, please somebody who shamed you? Or was it moving against, meaning getting angry, frustrated? Once again, is this a typical reaction for you in such situations? Is there a pattern of how you choose to protect yourself in such situations that are shame-provoking, specifically related to appearance and body image? It's okay if it's a pattern. It's okay if the situation you're thinking of is not a pattern. It's all good. We're just exploring. Nothing more, nothing less. But if you realize now that you do have a pattern, ask yourself, does it actually serve me? And just answer yes or no. We're not going to look into it in any more detail for now. It would be just very helpful for you to know what you're actually dealing with. Is it a pattern? Yes, no. Does it serve you? Yes, no. Now place your hands on your heart and with a lot of love and kindness to yourself, send yourself the energy of gratitude, the energy of loving kindness for being here, for being open to this work, for doing this exercise that is challenging, that is not comfortable. Acknowledge that. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well in body and mind. May I feel loved, cared for, at ease. May I know that I am enough. May I touch deep, natural peace. Now gently let go of your practice. And as always, scan your body. Notice what is going on for you right now, physically, emotionally, mentally. How are you really? Today, I invite you to continue with this reflection. When we are in shame, we are often overcome with the need to hide or protect ourselves by any means possible. Does it ring true for you? And continue the work we started today. Basically, you'll have to go through all the 12 shame categories. Remember the real shame-provoking situations you've been in for each of these categories, and examine your usual responses, identifying any patterns that may or may not be there. As always, enjoy your discoveries. In our Mindful Morning Circle group, the private group, I already posted the task, so if you want to do it, go there and just read the exercise and do it for yourself. And as always, if you're willing to share your thoughts and stories, please do so. Your voice is very important. Tomorrow is Wednesday, it's Lorna's breathing practice, and I will see you on Thursday. Thank you so much. Have a gorgeous day.